Well, as you may know, we've been taking 1 week here with each of the precepts and reviewing them and then we'll move along today. This week is the fifth, uh, the fifth precept. After this, we'll be all done with precepts and we'll be moving on. Yeah, just kidding. But well, the fifth precept is about consumption, being mindful uh, of our consumption, how much we want versus how much we need, and all that, the dance of all of that, the ongoing dance of all of that. And hmm, there was yeah, I guess it's still around. I know 30, 40 years ago, there was a big move on, and in the Dharma space too, around what we call voluntary simplicity, voluntary simplicity. Not, total renunciation, but simplicity, an encouragement to simplify our lives. And it's certainly something that should be at least alive as an inquiry for most of us. We do tend to overfill our lives, and we're complex enough as it is. And that's one of the things that's difficult with voluntary simplicity is that we are complicated cats. We're very complicated creatures. Yeah, very complicated. Yeah. And so voluntary simplicity can seem like a good idea, right? Cognitively. But we're not just cognitive beings, but then there are all these other impulses that are part of our nature. Yeah. And then part of that impulse is to want more, to want more. Yeah. And really that comes from evolutionarily. There's a whole school now, a whole perspective on, uh, and it's an area of evolutionary psychology, which really suggests that a lot of our psychological makeup, is connected with what we needed to do as a species to survive and thrive to get here. It's the old survival of the fittest, from Darwin, and that is very much part of our nature. It's very much part of our nature, and there's still that tendency to think of it in the Dharma world to some extent uh, as a defect, that there must be something wrong, that greed is present in my in my greed. We'll talk about greed mostly is present in my life, that it shows up, that I want more. Yeah. What evolutionary psychology does, it gives us permission to see that we're not particularly defective. We're just part of the human race. And that this is part of our wiring and not something that's just easily overcome or set aside or minimized or just tucked away somewhere. And of course, in Buddhism, we hear about the greed as being one of the poisons. Yeah, and obviously, big greed and big craving can lead to big problems in our lives. We know this. We know this. But that element of greed is something that is very much part of us, and it's one of those things that's there to some extent until some very high degree of enlightenment. Even on the early stages of enlightenment, greed just is diminished just a little bit. It's just diminished a little bit, I mean, so much of our work in the practice is to see it, to acknowledge its presence, and to begin to work with it a bit more skillfully and compassionately. Yeah. But it's really important to see how deep it is as part of our nature. This is one of the things that we would rather not accept, rather not see clearly. And sometimes we're embarrassed by it. Sometimes we're ashamed by it. That when that part arises, more strongly in us. And yet, okay, this is this we wouldn't have gotten here as a species if greed weren't part of the mix. We also wouldn't have gotten here if the affiliative part of our nature weren't there. You know, that one of the things that humans needed to learn to do long ago was cooperate in groups. You know, that is something that's special. It's special in the mammal world, but it's quite special in the human world. We've learned that we can't just go it solo. You know, there needs to be that cooperative, and so we're some combination of cooperative and competitive. They're both in there in us. You know, and aspirationally, we have a lot of ideas about love and connection and companion, and they're strong in us too. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Compassion is strong in us. But the wish, that drive to have more, to be more, and to be more, and to be more, to get ahead. You know, it's in there in us. It's in there in all of us individually. Yeah. And sometimes that's problematic. And we see it, and we see it in the world. You know, someone just told us this weekend about a show on Netflix that's on there on Netflix now called Chimp Empire. Chimp Empire. I thought, well, you know, just this morning, just less than an hour ago, I said, I'm going to watch the trailer of Chimp Empire. You know, yeah. No, look, we don't recommend many things to you, you know, in terms of you might want to check this out, but you might want to check out the trailer. The trailer might be enough. The trailer, it's a kind of a spoiler alert for what the whole thing is certainly about, or largely about, which is holy, holy mackerel. You know, this is our closest relative, right? Yeah. Uh, and you know, evolutionarily speaking, and oh my goodness, those cute little chimps. Look more closely and start to see, oh, this, you know, and for me, just seeing the trailer, I went, yep, we're not that far from this yet as a species, not that far. Some, thank goodness, but you look around the world, yeah, and you see how competitive, how competitive, how greedy, and how competitive. And certain areas where they come together as a group, a gang, you know, a group, but they're still competing with other groups. It's really about competition for survival in the jungle. How far are we from the jungle? How far are we from the jungle? Huh? Yeah. And this is such an important part of our nature, you know, to begin to see this and own it. It's one of the hardest things, you know. We shouldn't, you know, if we were good Dharma students, we wouldn't be greedy. Anger wouldn't be there anymore at all. Competition wouldn't be there at all anymore. I remember our friend Ron Siegel, he had a long conversation with somebody who'd done a lot of research on chimps, on baboons, I think, in particular. And he's measuring their stress. They were doing stress levels and watching their behavior and so forth. And Ron said to him at one point, he said, can you just give me a basic sense of what you learn, one of the most important things you've learned? And at first, the person gave some sciencey kind of explanation. He said, "Yeah, but can you break it down for me?" He said, "I wouldn't want to be. Let me put it this way: I wouldn't want to be a low-ranking male in a baboon troop." Okay. Now, I remember when I first heard that story, when Ron first told me that story, I thought, well, thank goodness we're nowhere near that. But then you look around, you know, and you look around and male, you know, we don't need to go into this too far, but male hierarchy, power, dominance, control, more power, more things. And what part of how look at our world and what it translates to us individually. And part of the American dream is what? Part of the American dream is having more, right? More food, yes. We all know that one. Yeah. And maybe this isn't you, maybe this isn't the way it plays out for you. But part of it, I think part of our practice is to see where are those places where we are driven to have more, be more, bigger. I mean, in a bigger truck, bigger car, bigger house, more. Did you ever see that T-shirt, the one who has the most toys when they die win? Now, of course, that's tongue in cheek, but really, if we look around, we see it. We see where we are as a species, and we see that part of the Buddhist path and part of our relationship to all these precepts, right? That we're talking about consumption here, is both to recognize that tendency without shame and without blame, but also to be more skillful and more compassionate at how we play it out in our lives. We can see that right, that impulse to grab, to want, it arises. Isn't it arise in all of us from time to time? Whoa, where does that come from? Well, it comes from our deep ancestral roots is where it comes from. Because the thing is, in mindfulness and in our practice, there is that moment of pause. Do I really want to really like reach out and grab that, or do I really, we can have that moment of pause, which is a moment of assessment and a moment of management. What do we want to do with that? What do we want to do? How do we want to integrate some of these impulses? I think we have to stop wishing that they're going to be gone completely. The skill and the practice, the art of the practice, is how do we manage some of these, some of our consumption tendencies with some skill, with some compassion, with some generosity, with some sharing. How do we do that? How do we do that? And how, as we've mentioned in all the areas that we explore, how do we refine that a bit? And like in so many areas, it's not just the having a aversion to it when these things arise, or just wishing that they'll be gone, you know. But how to more skillfully both acknowledge and not completely act out. That we have the possibility of not completely acting out, of not completely giving in to our impulses toward violence, toward aggression in some form, toward aggression, or toward overconsumption, in some ways. And it becomes a delicate and humbling part of our work, part of our path, And unfortunately, it's not one of these, so many things, right? So much of the practice, that one and done. Oh, I see it now, I won't do that anymore. How many times have we said that? I see that, I won't do that anymore. Except it's ongoing. It's ongoing, which is why mindfulness is so important part of our lives. It's so important to weave that into more and more into the fabric of our lives. So we'll have more choice and more moments to be more skillful and compassionate in many ways, but also with respect to this whole area of consumption. Yeah, yeah. And again, we can fall into all these places around consumption, like survival guilt. How come I have so much? Well, guilt, and there's a place for appreciating that, appreciating our place. We are blessed in so many ways in this area. But guilt isn't going to take care of this. It's how are we going to relate to how are we going to relate to consumption in this world? You know? Just being honest about it, being sensitive, being more sensitive, being more nuanced and more sensitive, you know, as we move along. Yeah. Mhm. Oh, I'm long-winded this morning, but important topic for us, this whole area of consumption. And yeah, so I wanted to just shed a little light, the light of permission to at least see it as part of our nature. And it's part of our true nature. We think only this light is part of our true nature. Not so. This is part of our deep true nature too, that we need to make a relationship with. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for your attention.